you know, and,
well, that we say that, Bear, but like there's so many times, man, where it's 2 hours flies and then we're like, oh, we could go for 6. Like when we had a lot of Freeland on, we are like, we could just talk all day. It just depends, and Mike, you're such a great storyteller and so entertaining to listen to. I love you on all the great Carlwood chats, man. And like, yeah, dude, it's just so pumped to have you on here. There's so much synchronicity between what you talk about, what we talk about. It's gonna be a great show.
Well, I'm excited. I just got do you know who, do you remember the podcast, the Occulture podcast, Ryan Peverly?
No, I don't know.
He stopped doing it years ago, but he was really early on. And I think it was the first podcast I was ever on. And I just got an email from him yesterday and I haven't heard from him for a while. And he's like, hey, I'm getting back into the game and I'd love to have you on. And then he said he saw that I was going to be on this show, and he said it's one of my favorites. So I just want to indicate that I consume very little content, and so for better for worse, and so a lot of this is I like stepping into a new environment, not knowing what I'm going to walk into. But what I want to indicate is the indication I've gotten so far is you guys run a great show, so I'm excited.
Oh. Thank you. That's sweet to say. I hardly ever watch other stuff too, because I honestly don't have time. There's just too much stuff going on. So Mike's always bringing up names. Oh, did you see this? Or do you know so-and-so? I'm like, dude, I'm out of the loop, Anyway, this is my only contact with the outer world is when I talk to people like you.
Excellent.
I definitely am guilty of having my my iPhone in my pocket while I'm gardening, listening to podcasts on double speed. So I have a voracious appetite for content. But I do agree, Michael. The core sense of knowledge comes from within when we're not doing that, and when we're just one with ourselves. And I'm trying to do that more. Like, put the phone away, garden in my own head, and and all that stuff. So that's great. Well, hey,
we do those dances. I remember because there was a point in time where there was never a moment where I did not have a headphone in an ear and I was listening to a podcast or a perspective. I mean, this is like 12 years ago. I remember I used to listen to this one guy. He used to put out 9-hour podcasts, and it was when my children were really young. So like newborn. And so I just put the headphone on and I'd do like parent stuff, but I would just listen. And that's all I would do. And then probably about 4 years ago, it just fell off. And now I don't even know what to do anymore in terms of like how to put content even on a device.
Well, hopefully we get to the point where we all just have a magic ball where we just rub it and our consciousness goes through it and then it goes out to the people who want to receive it.
I think that's
where
exactly that is fantastical as that sounds. And when I say fantastical, I mean of fantasy. I think that is the most true conclusion that we as human beings can go to, is by looking at all of the technology which we have right now and recognizing that there's a truth to it, like it exists, but then that we also know it's an inversion to the natural laws of our baseline reality. So that means that, like, yeah, this is an inverted expression of it, but its underlying truth is true. So how else could we do that? How else can we go in all of the things that we do on the internet, be able to express that in a infrastructure which is in harmony with the building blocks of material reality?
So you don't think being neural networked into the metaverse is a good idea?
I mean, so all right, so define the word good. I mean, it depends is it a good idea for Mike? No. Is it a good idea
if you want to,
for what I want to do?
If you want to,
like, I can understand from the perspective of why someone would say that is a good idea. And so I personally find that is an interesting way of analyzing what is being offered to us is, under what circumstances is this good? Like, who benefits with this being good? And so, yeah, I can see why people do it, and I can see why it's sexy and why it would be fun, but I can also, look at it from another perspective as well.
Okay, guys, yeah, I want to start the podcast officially. I mean, we have started it and I'll conclude this, but I want to do like our intro and stuff. So we can kind of be.
I was going to say I think the metaverse is a good idea if you want to turn it into a Thorazine shuffle drooling zombie.
Well, I would love to get into this more because I know Bear was just telling me you just did a podcast on this, and it's a very important topic, and I would love to get into that. So let me go ahead and just do the little intro here and hit record because we're live, but I haven't hit record yet. So for all those out there that got to see the live stream, you get that little wonderful nugget to start. But here, let me hit record and we'll fire this up. Boom, and we're back for another episode of AlphaCast. I'm Mike Winter, and I'm here as always with Dr. Bear Paul Lando, coming to you live and correct from the beautiful Smith River up here in the great state of Jefferson. So blessed to be here in this magical land where I kiss the ground every morning as the azure waters of the Smith River run behind my house and at the farm here. And it is winter coming. Wow, I was telling Bear before we started, I just looked at the weather for the next 10 days, and it's like in the 40s every day here, which is not normal. Even though we're in December, we typically are more in the 50s and even 60s. So we are looking at snow. I heard up to even 20 inches in the Sierras. Exciting for us skiers, snowboarder aficionados. So very excited about winter. Actually, one of my favorite times of the year. Get to buckle down, read some books, go skiing, and celebrate the holy days. So very excited. We do have the event coming up on the winter solstice, the 17th to the 21st. If you haven't heard about it, you've heard about it now. It is the event featuring Dr. Bear Lando, myself. I'll be hosting that with Josh Del Sol and Alex Zeck from Health Freedom for Humanity, as well as Devin Vrana from The Big Idea. We've got RFK Jr. to Kelly Brogan to Sayer G, huge names. I think there's like 80 speakers now lined up for this thing. It's going to be a huge global event, live streaming from the 17th to the 21st. I think we've got something like 60, 70 talks. I mean, it's ridiculous. So I'm very excited about it. I've been recording all week, recording with Mandy Jacob later today. If you guys aren't familiar with her, wow, Bear, she's in Ventura, where our other bit of operations is, and she is a fantastic, wonderful person. I'm looking forward to that. A bit of a mystic. She's taken on Ventura County with the masks and stuff in the court and winning left and right. Has a direct line to God and using that in the law. So just fantastic stuff all around. It's just an exciting time to be alive. And for anyone who's interested in more information on that, go to alphavedic.com/the event. And Bear was recently on One Radio Network. We posted that interview. Check it out. I just listened to it, Bear. It was really fun. I really love that guy, Tim Pony. You guys have a great rapport. And if you want like a really good Bear Lando hour of just like Bear unrefined, just who he is and what he talks about, wow, that is a great interview. And that is on our Telegram and on our Patreon. And speaking of Patreon, you can support us there at patreon.com/Alfa Vedic. Okay, today we are so excited. One of my favorite people to listen to, really, Michael Wann, is in the house. He is just an amazing storyteller and someone with such a massive breadth of knowledge that this conversation is going to go places, and I'm looking forward to it. Here's a great quote. "The human experience is a mystery, wrapped in a horror story, saturated with tells, reveals, and the sublime." Michael Wann. "There is a pattern to life. If one can find this pattern, they can manipulate it, appearing to have magical powers. With consciousness, genetic memory, and time, life cycles can be seen. Patterns have been introduced into our consciousness to generate a particular pattern put there by secret societies or the invisible college." Michael Wann is an anomaly. Despite being raised in America's most celebrated, quote unquote, planned community and large scale social engineering experiment, the Rockefeller-funded Columbia, Maryland, and he has been able to create an authentic and original expression of life. And that's in Columbia, Maryland. Correct, Michael?
That's Columbia, Maryland. Did I say all that sort of stuff? Damn, that sounded good.
Well, considering your expertise in astrology, it is fitting to look at Michael through the lens of his own astrology. Michael is a researcher and storyteller extraordinaire, focusing his ability to read the hidden on you through your natal chart, revealing the beauty of your cosmic story. His audiences find him light, fun, philosophical, and immensely creative with strong communication skills into the collective subconscious and the universal. So we're going to go deep into both the destructive and transformative qualities of the subconscious today. I'd love to touch on rewilding consciousness. I think that is a fantastic concept that we need to go deep into more, as it seems our consciousness is being stratified by the simulacrum that is forced around us these days. But Bear Lando, how are you doing? And I'm really excited for this one today.
Yeah, really happy to meet you, Michael. And, I was just listening to the one you did recently on the metaverse and really enjoyed that. It really caught my attention. And when I really started resonating with you is when you were, talking about patterns. And, I was trained in my medical upbringing to always try to zone in on that singular diagnosis. And after a little experience, I realized, wow, that doesn't even exist. In fact, it's stupid and it doesn't work, in clinical practice. So I refused. So I started looking elsewhere. And, one of the tools I employed is astrology. Now I'm not an astrologer like you, but I did study enough and use it to this day, where the portion I use, I like to think of it more as astrophysiology. And, I look at people, their resonance, not just with their, their birth charts and things, but, how that relates to how the larger bodies, microcosm down into our own physiology. And so anyway, that's a whole discussion, Mike. We have to do a whole thing on that someday in-house. But, it's just like, okay, this is awesome. We're going to talk about the patterns because, everything that we see going on today, you just can't, even in the truth community, they get kind of, just kind of a little bit myopic as far as tuning into one little thing rather than stepping back and saying, okay, what's really going on here? So really looking forward to that. And I'd like to get into some of the concepts you put out in your recent interview that you did with yourself, I guess, about the metaverse. And so, maybe, our audience always likes to kind of relate on a personal level to who we're talking to. A lot of people know you already, but for those that don't, maybe you could tell us how a guy from growing up in a planned Rockefeller community turns into be an astrologer and as eclectically deep in so many things as you are.
That's a good question. I'm wondering how deep I should go with that. And so, well, first off, thank you for having me here. I'm excited to meet you both for different reasons. Like as we said, like patterns and our point of reference, unless you want to go the path where you want to get rid of any sort of individuality, and I suppose that's a fine path, but that path hasn't found me. Like we look for patterns that connect to ourselves. So when I see Mike and we got the same name and the same initials and all of that, I'm like, ooh, I don't know what that pattern is, but we see that. And when I see you, Bear, like I'm looking at, because we got the Zoom screen, so I could see my face on Zoom and I see your face on Zoom beneath it. And I'm like, we kind of look like twins in a weird way. With our hats and our beards and like just general sort of body type. So I'm excited for that. I'm excited for this multi way of connecting with both of you and to hear this conversation and to go where this conversation or to see where this conversation goes. I'm excited. So that being said, let's go. And all the listeners, anyone who's listening at home, I'm grateful for that because sometimes it's nice when someone's listening to you talk to. But that being said, you asked the question, how did, nice little softball question. How do I end up where I'm sitting? Having come from a very, very regimented, system of upbringing, and arguably all of the system, most of the systems I'm American focused. I was born in the United States, but the systems are regimented regardless of what that would be. Like I didn't grow up and go through like the Exeter boarding school program, but that's a program, or like, there's so many different things. So I went through through a particular one, Columbia, Maryland, which only what I say about it is not written on their brochures or website, but just, you know, a natural conclusion based upon studying people and where the money is and all that sort of stuff. And this also goes back where I'm going to go with this is this idea, and I'm still stuck on it. I don't think I got into it in the video, is meta, like, because meta has so many definitions of a word, and this idea of meta being self-reflective, like, you know, the meta, how meta, like when something's self-reflective. And so it would only make sense that maybe going through a system, which I did, that I would be able, which was so regimented that I would be able to kind of like break out of it, because if it wasn't so regimented or controlled or contrived, whatever word we want to use, it wasn't so controlled as much as it was contrived, that I would be able to kind of to see the writing on the wall. I was well served by culture, you know, like, you know, I was likable, intelligent, all of the things which people have, which are valued in our system. And so when you're valued by the system, and it reinforces more and more of that. And so I went to school and I was like in a fraternity, and I got like a good job in technology, like in the very early days of the internet. And then like I walked away from it all. I walked away from it all at age 30, not completely. So I left the technology, and I still living in DC at the time. And I worked a little bit for an architect, and then I moved to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Probably best known by folks who aren't familiar with it, is the highest concentration of Amish in North America. I'm not Amish, if you can't tell by now. But that journey kept on unfolding. And what the journey was just stripping away all of the things that were expected of me and valued, and not even with a plan. Like, you know, that was a natural just occurrence. I listened to the things that it captured my intelligence, that captured my interest. And I started doing things that felt like I naturally wanted to do. And I started doing less and less of things that were expected of me. And, you know, I'm still in that path, and I don't even know what that path is. And it certainly has frustrated a lot of people, myself included at times, but that's what's brought me to really where I'll add this one other thing. So then also going through the process of a divorce about 5 years ago, my wife was really what kept me in a lot of ways connected with a more mainstream lifestyle. But once that disappeared, that kind of allowed my kite to soar in places it hadn't before. And again, like, I'm not saying it's always been fun. It's always been a smart decision, but it's been my path. And I think that's what there are two things which I try to do right now is I try to tell stories which I know, and I can only know the stories which I've lived. And I do it not necessarily to indicate that I am a man of insight as much as I think I'm a man of storytelling. But if anything else, what I hope to be is a man of inspiration. And that inspiration is for people to apply a higher amount of acuity and resolution in looking at their own lives and seeing the beauty in the mundane, and like questioning like how you got here, and like, you know, what are your decision making processes, and you mentioned this before, the subconscious, and really accepting the fact that we have a blind spot, and not necessarily trying to solve that blind spot, but recognizing that's part of the human experience, is that we don't know.
And, you know, I'm starting to believe that maybe what we do out here has nothing to do with our path in the first place. And, you know, if it makes you feel any better, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I just kind of get up and, you know, do the same thing over again and things just unfold. And any plans that I've ever made, they maybe might be somewhat in the ballpark sometimes, but usually I end up doing something totally different that ends up being way better in the first place.
I think that's one of the things which really interests me is, and maybe the question is a little bit shaped, but this is how I shaped it, is identifying like, how are humans supposed to be? And maybe a better way of saying this, like, what is the natural way of what being human is? What's our natural expression? And I think our natural expression is what you're just describing. Like, planning's important a little bit, but like flexibility is too, like that dance. And so yeah, like there was a time where I was very, very committed to artistic, creative expression. And so I did a bunch of shows and I was in some galleries and stuff like that. And this was after I walked away from like a career in technology where everyone I knew was like, what are you going to do walking? Like, how are you going to support yourself? Like, I don't know. And then I started making art. They're like, you can't make art. You didn't go to school. And I started making art. It was really good stuff. And I started getting into shows and you know, winning contests and all that sort of stuff. And then one day I was like, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. And people were like, what? You can't quit this. And I'm like, well, I'm gonna. And then I just started doing something else. And so the reason I'm sharing that is I think that's exactly what you're saying. Is like, you know, just kind of following where we're interested in. And it's seemingly, if you're not trying to get there in the quickest, shortest path, well, then, you know what? Well, then it's going to be a fun walk there. And I think that should be honored. Or at least
exactly.
recognized.
Well, and what we're talking about here, what I bring up a lot, Michael, is this idea of we're all on our own hero's journey. And really a great analogy is Homer's Odyssey. Nothing was planned out there. It was just like one kind of debacle and kind of conflict to overcome after the other, right? And we can plan for meeting up with, you know, God knows what, in terms of the mythical monster around the corner. But in the end, it's like you got to just figure it out on the fly. And I think that's something like what we're talking about in this event that's coming up is like having that ability, that flexibility, that agileness, and the confidence in your own abilities to do that, to really succeed in life, so that you can realize, hey, you're your own hero. Like, wake up and be stoked on life, because this is like your own story that you get to live in.
You said this a couple moments ago about the excitement about being alive right now. And if there's ever, at least in my lifetime, if there's ever been a time where that advice, which you just said, of like, you know, plans don't matter, meeting with whatever comes up is applicable, it's now. Yeah. It's not like that. It's like, that's not like a nicety for the small 1% who wants to be a mystic and travel the back roads. Like, no, this could very well be the strategy necessary to navigate what society is doing to itself, or someone's doing to our society. However you want to go and look at that.
Yeah. And so Mike, go ahead, Bear.
No, you finish.
Well, no, I was just going to move on to this idea, because you brought it up in previous stuff about rewilding consciousness. Is that kind of what you're talking about a little bit there, or what is that notion really in your mind?
Okay. So the rewilding, first off, is like, rewilding is a general terminology. Like I've got a bunch of friends who are in the world of permaculture and natural ecosystems. So I'm familiar with their language. And so I borrowed this concept of rewilding, which is allowing nature to be the way nature wants to be, as opposed to the shaping of it or minimalizing the shaping. It is where I sit right now, the conclusion I'm at, and you know, who knows, maybe it'll change in the future, but right now, this is where I am, is recognizing how much of our experience begins by the worldview that was given to us, you know, garbage in, garbage out sort of stuff. And really looking at, this is when I talked about, like, you know, being in Columbia, Maryland, and these very, very contrived types of cultures and educations. And, you know, I'm a pop culture aficionado, or at least I was at some point in my life. but recognizing how everything is shaping, my vision of what I think life is. But the biggest question is, we don't know what life is. We don't know where we are, how we got here, what we're supposed to do. The biggest questions are mysteries. We're just told to, like, you got to figure out what your career and what your life path is and like that, but we're not going to talk about the big stuff. But the point I'm trying to make is everything seems to fall within the shaping of what is to be expected in your life. And the rewilding consciousness, I'm going to define consciousness. And I think it's important to define words, not necessarily to say it's the right way or wrong way, but just so you know what I mean when I say this word. Consciousness to me is this, it has two parts. It has your inner world and it's the outer world, and it's the dance between the two and how they feed off of one another. And so when I say like consciousness, I mean all of those parts. Rewilding consciousness is the purposeful act of taking your awareness outside of anything which has been programmed and just allowing you to put this amazingly powerful focal device of mind. We can study anything. You're going to study just as hard for if you're going to learn the periodic tables as you could learn baseball statistics, as you could learn your lover's tendencies. Like we can do that with anything. And to take that consciousness and apply it as far out of the system, as far out of the system, but while still being in material reality. And that's not to say that there isn't things outside of material reality, but using material reality as as the border, because once you go in outside of material reality, well, then that's a whole nother ball of wax. I want to stay on that point, but going there, applying my awareness, my intelligence, my focus, studying things with as little definition and naming as possible, for the sole purpose of, by knowing that whatever I put my awareness to, I link up with it. That's the nature of being human. Whatever you put your awareness to, you are going to develop a relationship, and you're going to begin to have life from that. And I want to go as far out of the system, but have it as real as can, with the trust that somehow that will take, like, all this stuff which I don't even know I'm carrying, but begin to rewild on that level. And to me, that deals with earth stuff and star stuff.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And I think the predicament, like maybe the eastern half of our planet, we'll say, is maybe didn't develop to its fullest because it was always achieving outer body experiences, and that was the main goal. And then of course we're the other extreme here, where it's manifestation in the physical at all costs. And what I've discovered in my own studies is that the real purpose is to get a vocabulary and practical, ways of applying what you are downloading from other realms. And so that's, even in medicine, it was like that. Okay, I know the vocabulary, so now I can go into those other states and then just understand what I'm getting, because now I have a translation tool. You've chosen astrology. And I think astrology is amazingly spectacular as far as doing the same thing, only unfortunately, most people think it's about reading your horoscope. When it comes to the physical body, I use it as a way to, again, understand, certain resonance that's happening, between the two worlds. And then, okay, how can we use that as a practical tool? Now, you've gone into it way deeper, and I don't even know how to frame this as a question, but is there anything you can share as far as, how it's a real practical endeavor and how people might, benefit by just understanding some basic concepts?
Well, and thank you for that question, because I like to talk about astrology, and I think my approach is less common or unique. First off, I love how you talk about vocabulary, and I mentioned defining words. We got to use words until we can go and not use words. We need to, and one of the most important things we can do is define the words, because the most important words, in my opinion, in the English language are those that have the most amount of nuance. And because they have nuance, there's no uniform definition. So that's why like consciousness being one of those words. So I love that. I love that. So, okay. So let's talk about astrology from Mike's perspective for a little bit. First off, I think astrology is the birthright of every human being. And what I mean by that is, and I question everything. Like I accept like the stuff I can't like prove wrong or whatever. Like I still know like, well, I'm accepting this, even though I don't know if it's factual or not. And so a lot of history, like I'll go with that. I don't got better history, but I just know that they've lied to me in the past. So why do I think this is true? But nonetheless, so let's assume like, you know, history is true and timelines are true. Like, I don't care like when you've lived. I don't care if you lived in a city or if you lived in a hut, if you lived in any of these things. It is the most basic human experience to walk outside of where you live and to look up at the heavens and ask for like, give me a sign, give me some insight. What am I to do? How am I here? Like, because we don't have those answers, and there is nothing bigger and more universal than looking up at the heavens. And so when I say astrology is the human's birthright, that's what I mean, is to go and to look and to ask questions while looking up and wanting to garner a reflection back. I question like what's a star, what's a planet. I question how they got there. I don't have answers, but I just do know I have questions. And there is, when we begin to look at the heavens, and we begin to have a vocabulary of the heavens, being able to identify things and name them and so forth, we begin a relationship on that level. And that level is just defined as this to me. It's the stuff we're underneath of. I don't know if we're a simulation. I don't know if the Anunnaki made us. I don't know if God made us in 7 days. All I can say for certainty, like I like those stories, and some of those stories I like more than others. What I can say for certain is I could see those white dots and I can identify them. They're somewhat predictable. So, all right. So because of that, and because the human being is unlimited in their creativity and in their intelligence and their ability to make connections. Like as soon as I hear from the mainstream sources, like when you start making connections, like, well, you know, it is the human, you know, it's the brain just naturally wants to see patterns. I'm like, well, that's a pretty good indication that you should be looking for fucking patterns, because your system is naturally meant to look for it. It's like you're naturally made to walk. So stop squirming on the ground, snake boy. So, okay. So we have this amazing capability of what we'll call intellect and all of these levels of intellect, and to apply it to the heavens. There's nothing that could be more spectacular than that. And so because of that, there are infinite ways which the heavens give information. And to me, the more we can understand what the logic of why we think it gives us information, the more true it seems to become. Like one of the things which I found so interesting, this goes more so to like more like horoscope or natal chart type of astrology, is the difference between people who follow a tropical chart and a sidereal chart. And don't worry if you don't know what those words mean. All that means is that with the same birth date, you're going to have a different chart. Your planets are going to be in different signs. And that always rubbed me the wrong way, because you want to know which is the right one. And I started listening to people who were very knowledgeable. People have spent years of their lives studying a particular line of astrology, and they've all come to the same conclusion, which is more or less the same thing if you talk to any lifelong Christian or Jew or Muslim. And what they've come to realize is that they're right. And so when you realize that they're all right, well, then the truth of the matter seems to be like, it's not limited to that. It's going to give you accurate information. So all of that said, that's my preface. Where I am with astrology right now is what I call objective astrology. And that is, in the most practical way, is becoming familiar with what your heavens landscape looks like. So that literally means walking out your front door, being able able to know when I'm looking south, being able to identify the ecliptic, know where the eastern horizon is, the western horizon, and then being able to see the ecliptic. None of this stuff is hard. And then being able to recognize then this is what's cool, is if you know your own natal chart, this is what your natal chart is. Your natal chart is the snapshot of the heavens at the moment you were born. We don't know nothing. We know nothing about the human experience, but what we can say is there's no other experience more drastic than when you went from living inside of someone to no longer living inside of someone. That's universal and that's drastic. And we don't know what Earth is. We don't know where Earth is. We don't know anything. But what we can say for certain is like, well, all of those moving things in the sky that are in constant motion, this is what it was when I went through my most drastic moment. So that is the most solid link which we have to the environment in which we are having our mysterious life experience. And to me, that is the definition of significance. And so once you become familiar with that, not as an abstract idea, not as like, oh, my sun's in Sagittarius and my Mercury is in Capricorn. It's like, okay, well, the sun was located right here when I was born. And this is when that was, without needing to go to a story, because I can go to the story, but I'm choosing not to do the story, but to becoming, and this is the rewilding consciousness. This is like, I know that this is what the heavens are. And no matter what time of day or where I am on the earth, when I'm looking at the heavens like this, that part of the sky, I always have a certain connection because of this. And being comfortable with that and using like all of my intellect just to become aware of that and identifying where things are, what planets are in real time right now. That to me is how I practice astrology right now. And it is a practice without a expectation of a result or a specific result. The result which I'm expecting is that my mind is deepening its connection with that level of reality. And I'm bringing a trust to that because I've eliminated the trust to all the other stuff. And this is all I got left. And so I sit with it until there's something which is more real, more tangible, or better information. And that to me is my stepstones as when I moving through my own life and what is being offered, what we have access to.
Here on the farm, it's not really about being mathematically precise as far as, when you plant something or what chart you're following or anything. It's really not a mental endeavor, but what you are doing is acknowledging that there's stuff up there. Mm-hmm. You realize there is some kind of tangible link. I'm kind of convinced that between what I'm growing and with myself. And when I kind of look at myself as an intermediary, because I'm, my whole goal is to grow things. It just seems to work better when my consciousness is acknowledging that there's a conducive resonance between us all if we all pay attention to each other.
That's exactly what I meant by the recognition that you don't need to really understand it and the natural and what is the way of being human. What you just described is recognizing that we can make connections, and whatever we're going to be making connections to, it just flows. And that is the truth. And it doesn't matter what you're going to go and make those connections to, whether that's a religion or whether that's a technology or whether that's anything. It's like wherever you put your attention, like the more creative you can be with it and the more playful and the more artistic, those are going to be the results. And half the fun is seeing how that shows itself.
And of course, the predicament we're in now is they've deliberately taken the art away from science.
Oh yeah, I mean, arguably that happened when they separated astrology from astronomy. Or that was part of it. And this is the thing which I think is cool, because like I can definitely I got a PhD in conspiracy theory. Like, I've put the amount of hours studying conspiracies on the deepest levels, like from which would probably equate to someone who went and got a PhD. I have that type of exposure, but at the end of the day, like, I love the idea, and this is a choice. You know, I think belief is so important, and the important thing is recognizing what belief is and then deciding how you're going to use it. And because it doesn't mean that there's a problem with belief, but I choose the belief, which is like all of the thing which we're experiencing right now. Ultimately, the purpose of it is for us to recognize the stuff we never would have recognized to begin with. And I use that as the example of growing up in Columbia, Maryland in the beginning. Like, I think I'm really good at being able to recognize convoluted control from behind the scene is because I had it so badly.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, we often say that in the mainstream science, they've separated spirit and magic from science, but really deep down they haven't. Look at CERN, look at what they're actually doing, and with the actual real like physical science they're really doing, they're still all attached to occulted symbology and magic. They've just made it seem like that. And you know, going back to Francis Bacon and the original progenitors of science, they were mystics, basically.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, that's where I began with what I call the Susquehanna mystery. I started sharing that research about 4 or 5 years ago. And all that begins with Francis Bacon. I mean, one of the Francis Bacon is, if you're not familiar with Francis Bacon, the best analogy, and whether this is an analogy, what I'm about to say, or an accurate description of life, I don't know, but it could possibly work both ways. But Francis Bacon is seemingly the name of a major OS upgrade, like in the way that Apple names their OS upgrades. Like what it changed everything. It changed language, it changed religion, it changed science, it changed North America, it changed everything. And when you see that, this is a thing which I go to a show with someone else who really understands. Has a very, very negative perspective of who Francis Bacon is as a character in our history, and I get that. But then
I'd like to go into this, Michael, because we get this a lot, and we're big fans of the Ascended Masters teaching, Saint Germain, and there's a theories that Saint Germain might have actually incorporated the entity of who Francis Bacon is. And then you get this whole notion that this is the deep Masonic darkness of where we led to now. And so, yeah, go with this, brother.
So this I
love this stuff.
If you're going to go and apply your consciousness in this area, and I think it is like it's kind of old fashioned where you would hear you don't want to go and look at the esoteric or the occult, that it's dangerous there. And we've gotten to the point where like, oh, that's ridiculous. But I think there is a truth to that. There is a danger there in the fact that you're going to go and bring your consciousness to some really, really deep stuff. And if you are not prepared for it, it's like, you don't know what's going to happen. So if you're going to bring your consciousness to these areas, you should be, in my opinion, of spending time there is, it's not so simple. It's not so simple. And the whole uncertainty principle, like you mentioned in a little while ago about Eastern and Western perspectives, you know, and I like to take from both sides, you know, it's, oh, there's something to learn from right here. So it's this Eastern like uncertainty and like non-committal and like the detachment really, I think, is helpful in going in these dark esoteric stuff, because you're going to find exactly the old adage is like what you're looking for, you're going to find, because you're going to find all of the evidence to suggest that Francis Bacon is the worst of the worst. And you're going to find all of the evidence to suggest that he's the best of the best, or you're just gonna be like, well, I don't know. But this is my favorite thing about the Francis Bacon story. And I just like to use the word story just to be kind of nebulous. And it is that Francis Bacon, his approach, and it comes from one of the Psalms. I'm not particularly knowledgeable of the Bible, but the Psalm says something along the lines of, it is God's joy to hide the treasure, and it is the king's joy to find the treasure. And he brought that approach to the mystery of life, which is like, it is the discovery practice. Like, yes, it's hidden for you. And for the people who does the hiding, like if you have children, if you've ever celebrated Christmas, there's a real joy of hiding presents, like, you know, when they're 4 years old on Christmas Eve. And if that was a spoiler for anyone, like, I apologize, you should have moved past that. And there's a joy of finding that. And there's a joy of like, when you realize like, oh, hold on, this is just a scam. But I think that's the truth. And I like to think of Francis Bacon. My experience has been that yes, there's a whole bunch of stuff which is like, wow, this is disharmonious. Like, I like to, rather than good or bad, I like to think about harmonious and life affirming and life destructive. And it is my understanding that there's both life affirming and destructive in life, but overall we're more about expanding than we are, like the death falls back into more expansion as opposed to total collapse. And so we see with Francis Bacon and his works, like, yes, there is a lot of stuff which is disharmonious, but maybe it's bringing us somewhere. And what is that bringing us to is a greater understanding of the nature of what it means to be human being with the sky above our head and earth underneath our feet. Because the biggest mystery is, where am I? How did I get here? And what am I supposed to do? And so my sense is it fits in, like, as our vocabulary gets better, like that's the whole idea behind the scientific method to begin with, is to be able to have a better understanding of the workings. Let me say one more thing, and then I'm gonna pause because I want to hear what both of you have to say.
Yeah.
So I had, as I indicated, I studied conspiracy theory. I studied psychology with a particular emphasis on hypnosis and subconsciousness and like neuro-linguistic programs, like real practical sort of stuff, esotericism, magic. There was this 10-year period in my life where I just studied all of that, and I would vary. And like, and so my view definitely takes in consideration all of those things. So 4 years ago or 5 years ago, when I began on the Susquehanna mystery, what happened and how this began was, as I said, I went through a divorce, and part of the effects of the divorce was I became free in a way which I was never free before. And what I mean by that mostly is in my thinking and what I could talk about, because a lot of my thoughts make people uncomfortable because they just, you know, whatever. Is when that divorce happened, I moved to a small town in Pennsylvania, which I said I'd never move to, but life brought me there, and I found myself there. And it was a difficult time, like regardless of whether I was ready for a divorce or not, it was still a difficult time. And that is when this Susquehanna mystery began. And it just began with a curiosity as to, what is this river, which is up 500 feet away from my apartment? And it is from that river that I uncovered through historical documents dating right back to Francis Bacon, all of these like undeniable things. And the most specific is the fact that in the John Smith map of Virginia, so this John Smith being the leader of Jamestown being the first English colony in the New World, in that map, there is a reversed 40 for their latitudinal markers. There's a 37, there's a 38, there's a 39, 40, and 41. And 40 isn't just reversed, it's mirrored. And because I know so much about conspiracy and I knew so much about magical practices, I knew mirroring was rather significant, but I knew nothing about parallels and I knew nothing like that. And when I went to go see where in reality, in material reality, was the Susquehanna River and the 40th parallel, it was literally where I was sitting. It was literally where I was sitting. Like, I was at 40 degrees, 0 minutes, and maybe like 20 seconds. Like, I was right there. And the point I'm trying to make with this, is there's my my consciousness somehow creates this. Like, whether you say my consciousness knew that was there and I prepared myself so that when I would see that, or just the very fact of the matter is like, I've been really into conspiracy and consciousness and like I was wide open emotionally. And this is just how reality works. And you got this great mystery. I don't know the why. I just know that it did happen, and it happens more and more and more. So I'm gonna pause right now and just say, like, this is like part of the why I do the rewilding of consciousness, because I see stuff like that. I've seen stuff like that happen in my life, and I am unbelievably curious and optimistic and joyful when I think about the mystery of what it means to be a human being. And Francis Bacon, one way or the other, ties very deeply into where we are right now.
Couldn't agree more. I'm going to let Bear go first because I know we're big fans of all this. So, and then I've got a really weird theory. Go ahead, Bear.
All right. I'd love to hear it. Go on, Bear.
I was just going to add a side note that was kind of curious because I've delved a lot into legal law and all that kind of stuff. And Francis Bacon actually figures prominently in there. I've seen some pretty good evidence.
Prominent legal minds in the modern world. He was the Attorney General before he became the Lord Chancellor.
Yeah, so I've seen pretty good evidence that King James commissioned him as the only intellect possible within his court to rewrite the King James Bible, because his whole intention was to have greater commercial control over his subjects. Francis Bacon did that for him. And what he also did at the same time was to put in the Bible code, which is, of course, what many Christians think, well, that's evidence that, as far as the source of the Bible writings, but it was actually this Francis Bacon, or maybe even possibly an ascended master, if he in fact shares a persona with Saint Germain or any of these other characters.
So yeah, like I've come to very, very, the same sort of, all fingers point to that the way I understood it specifically was he was the final editor. So there were, I think, 39 different editors of the books of the Bible, which became the King James Bible. And then they sat with him for 3 years, and he was the final editor, the 40th editor, not only with the Bible code he added, but also filled with other Rosicrucian and steganographies type of hidden information. That Bible was released, I believe, was it 1609? I believe is the first printing of the King James Bible. So as this was happening, he was also, King James oversaw, he gave a royal charter to a group of merchants, the merchant class, to go and colonize the New World. And that was a for-profit company, and they had a board of directors, and Francis Bacon sat on that board of directors, and he wrote their charters, like he's on that level. And then John Smith was the story of John Smith is so ridiculous, but anyway, it's fascinating. But so the story of John Smith is he comes back in 1610. So Jamestown was established in 1607. This is all overlapping perfectly. This is King James Bible, the establishment of the New World. John Smith goes over. I'm under the openness. I'm not saying this is the case in American legalese. John Doe is a placeholder name for someone whose name we don't know. In the British legal system, it's John Smith. So John Smith goes over, to Jamestown. He comes back with all of these notes to make this map, which is the John Smith map of Virginia, the map I made reference to. He comes back. He's the leader of Jamestown. Of course, he's going to go and sit with the head of the executive council. Of course, he's going to sit with Francis Bacon. 2 years after the release of the King James Bible is when the John Smith map of Virginia was released. My sense is whether or not it's Francis Bacon directly, or he just oversaw some of the fine, steganography details. I don't know, but all signs point right there. It's a very, very tight and easy to follow storyline and timeline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so crazy how one man has his hands in so many things. And it almost, so I've been really playing a lot with this Tartaria concept and the reality system we're in, and how elastic it is. And it's a great point in your own life and all of our own lives, how where we put our consciousness kind of fits us into the puzzle of history and everything. And what you're talking about with the mystery of the Susquehanna, which by the way, Michael, was the first river I ever fished on when I was a little kid, because my mom grew up in Binghamton, New York. And I would go out there every summer and mostly did lake bass fishing in Pennsylvania across the border. But the first time I ever threw a rod into a river was the Susquehanna there in Binghamton. A funny side note.
Right at they call that Big Bend, where the river
Yep.
does a big turn right there, right
Yep.
in Binghamton. I'm very familiar with it. So,
Yep.
so please go on, Mike, with your.
Okay. So the idea of Bacon being much more than a man, being a thought construct or some sort of progenitor of the simulation, and that this is a restructuring of reality that happens every 400 or 500 years. A lot of people say it's a 400-year reset. And that if you start to look into Jamestown and a lot of the New World, it's only a certain few individuals that were really responsible for the technology, supposedly to cross over. You know, John Dee is another big character out of that time. And I'm not talking John D. Rockefeller, guys. I'm talking John Dee, who is the original 007, if you will, and something we've never really talked about on the show, Bear, but another character in history who is just really fascinating. But the idea here that maybe a lot of this quote unquote history was actually, and I don't know how the reality works, I don't know how the simulation works, but that these are actually, and I don't know if these are divine angels that are doing this, or this is literally some sort of archonic deception. I don't know, because the duality plays out in a way that's fun, and it's no evil in the end or no good. It's just is. But maybe this Francis Bacon entity or thought form or whatever it is, this type of individual or type of thought creation comes out every time that we initiate the new cycle. And so right now we could be going into that new cycle where we're going to have the new Francis Bacon, and what Steiner would call, we might even talk about Ahriman here. But and so we have this interplay of the duality with Francis Bacon, right? When you read New Atlantis, it's like some mind-blowingly cool stuff, but also some like kind of creepy, really dark stuff in it. So I don't know, maybe this is how the reality interplays with history, and that it rewrites itself through these type of characters.
Well, I'm completely on the same page with you, and particularly about the asking the questions, like seeing like enough things and be like, all right, let me pose some questions. And I mean, that's the whole idea of scientific method, is like, let me have a question, let me have a hypothesis. I'm not tied to it. I don't have to be right. I'm not getting funding money. So I have it's not, but I'm going to come up with just a friggin' question.
Yes.
And then I test it. And then I have a point of reference, I move forward. So I think that's the best way to do this. What I have discovered, this could have, maybe it's got nothing to do with it. Maybe it does. I don't know. But the FB and the Francis Bacon and the BF and the Ben Franklin, I've always found really, really kind of significant, because within my research, I see that Francis Bacon and Ben Franklin, they keep on bumping up against one another. But then when you then add in Facebook and FB into that one as well, like it kind of fits into, a little bit more of what you're suggesting, how it keeps showing itself over and over again. Like maybe there's just initials, who knows? Sometimes a broken clock's a broken clock. But I think all of those points you brought up are very, very fair questions to look at, particularly now, or to pose when looking at reality. You brought up Tartaria. I mean, I certainly have some thoughts on that. You brought up John Dee. You made an indication that he's different than John D. Rockefeller. The more I learned about John Dee and John D. Rockefeller, I came to the opposite conclusion. I came to realize they're the same person, but maybe I'm wrong. But nonetheless, John Dee, like looking at that person and how much influence he has on our current culture, like it's crazy. It's never changed.
Yeah. And
I
I was just going to say one thing up too, I love about Francis Bacon is that he kind of counters mathematics and he's really into the observation and actually kind of counters Copernican models and the idea of with the Jesuit models of the globe and everything. And maybe this has to do with the greater realm that we're in and hiding what other lands are past, whether you go flat earth or not. What's past Antarctica or what's out there more. And maybe there was a specific reason why keeping us in this specific bubble. So lots to unpack there. Yeah, go ahead, Bear.
No, I was just going to say, I think the problem we have is we're always trying to think in timelines. And, we get into a different kind of physics discussion a lot on our show where we're, actually describing how timelines are created. And in fact, they're a perception. So, of course, and then, of course, the Bible says the end of time, which I don't believe means the end of everything. It's just the end of the concept of time. Mm-hmm. So obviously there's going to be adepts like Francis Bacon that are traveling back and forth and appearing, reappearing, changing the future, the past. And, I think we really have to, like you're saying, rewild our concepts about what time is in the first place. And it's probably going to answer a lot of questions. I'm kind of got a lot of that stuff on the tip of my tongue already. And it doesn't it doesn't stretch my imagination, with some of the things we're all talking about here.
Well, I love how you bring up time, and time is, in my opinion, like it's one of the primary tools of consciousness that links us to a linear look at events. I mean, I know I'm as guilty of it as anyone else. It's like I have an internal understanding, a very accurate internal understanding of what time it is. And there was once upon a time that like I looked at that as a real good thing. Like I always know what time it is. In the same way, I have a really strong sense of direction. And then I started thinking about it, I'm like, well, I am so linked up on the timeline. I'm so linked up that I always know what time it is. I don't even need to have a watch. And so, what is that doing within my own consciousness and limitations of, like, I loved how you point out, like, what happens when you step outside of those constructs and it's a completely different world. The end of time does not necessarily mean the end of it all. It just means the end of following time or limited by time.
Leaving father time, leaving our father and stepping out right onto our own as the way growing up from being the child that's under father time in a way, right?
Certainly.
Yeah, a lot of us are experiencing routine glitches in the matrix these days, and I think everything we're talking about explains as far as why things don't seem to add up with our old mindsets.
There's so much weird stuff going on right now. And I mean, I know where I'm sitting and I'm curious what you guys have to say. Like I've come up with probably like 4 or 5 really, really strange things. And I've always been a guy who's looking for strange things. So it's like, I fulfill the of self-fulfilling prophecy. You're going to find what you're looking for. So I'm always looking for strange things, but I've had some strange things that have occurred recently, which are very strange. And I'm resisting my, as badly as I want to define why or what's happening. And just sitting with the fact that, okay, something weird's happening and this sort of weird stuff wasn't happening before. Are you also seeing that in your regular life? Like just strange things that are, and could you share an example, I suppose?
For myself, I live in a different lifestyle here, and I see more animals than I do humans on any given day. A lot of big animals, and there seems to be a real definitive communication where they're always on the spot whenever I happen to be thinking of something. When, just name any situation, they're always there. And then you even get eye contact sometimes. And there's, definitely that intelligence where they are aware that, I'm here to teach you something. Of course, you default back to old animal medicine and those archetypes that each of the animals portray, definitely tell you a different story. So My life is more about just, observing, and I have the benefit of walking around in different surroundings. So I'm in a different communication resonance than most people because I'm not around the electronics and I'm growing things and I'm, just animals. I mean, just magically, they always show up at the exact time where you're thinking about something, you have a question about something, and boom, they're there with the answer. I don't know if that relates at all to what you're asking.
I love that. Animals to me are one of you can't really fake it unless it's really well trained or it's a fake, really good fake. Like, that's where you're going to get real information from that realm.
Yeah, and for me, it's been weather this year. I've been playing a lot with orgone and Wilhelm Reich type technology, but even before that, well, around that time when we started putting in the pipes in the ground and all that stuff and the tower busters out, I'm a volunteer firefighter, and a lot of times this summer was coming up. Oh, it's going to be another possible drought and really bad fire late into the fall. And I said, no, guys. Intuitively, I'm feeling heavy rain coming in September and October, and they're like, "There's nothing snow. We're moving away from that. We're going into, the global change of the climate where everything's going to be dry." I said, I was telling my fellow firefighters who are all normies and don't really get this. I'm like, intuitively, I'm telling you, dude, we're going to get a deluge, and boom, we got like one of the wettest months we've had in a long time in October, and it was like crazy. And they were like, how did you know? And I'm like, I just intuitively felt it, guys. Open up, man. Like, start feeling stuff. So yeah, I think as they say, the veils are thinning, right? You hear that a lot as we're right now. So yeah, some trippy stuff happening all around us all the time.
People like Reich actually demonstrated that we have the capacity and the responsibility to manipulate the ethers, and we're not just subject to them.
Yeah. I've been having a lot of stuff with like things missing and reappearing in dramatic ways. You brought up the animals. I'll tell you, I mean, this could be nothing, but I think it's kind of funny. So I live in a house with of other things. There are 4 cats in the house, and there's the most recent addition was a kitten, which came into the house in September. And in the past 2 weeks, the kitten starts nursing on me. I've been around, I know cats. I'm not like a cat expert, but I know that cats have never nursed me before. And I wake up every morning and this cat is nursing me. And I'm like, okay, well, why is the cat nursing me? It didn't nurse before. And like, just trying to be like logical and explanation. And then I go over to my boy's house, my son's house, and they have a dog that I've known for a while. And this dog all of a sudden just won't stop licking my hands. And my boys are like, listen, like the dog doesn't do this to anyone else. And there's nothing on my hands. There's nothing like that. But I'm sharing this as just like one of the experiences like with domesticated animals, which I'm seeing. Like that's a very kind of like material. There seems to be something from my body which is of value to these domesticated animals. But then I've also had lots of weird bird interactions too, primarily owls. So I love talking and looking and thinking about the animal kingdom as feedback mechanisms. Part of my past couple months.
Oh, and something that weird happened to me with an animal. I was just remembering this. So Astroworld, that whole weird thing that happened a couple weeks ago, super dark and creepy. The music festival, Michael, that happened.
Mm-hmm. I know. The Travis Scott stuff.
Yeah. So I'm in some like conspiracy channels on Telegram, private ones, and we're sending all the, the typical conspiracy darkness stuff. And so I'm kind of I took a few days off from not looking at that. I'm like, okay, I'll finally see. I was like on Monday after the event, I'll finally see what this is all about. I'm ready for it. My soul, I got a little shell around my soul to look at this stuff. And then boom, I'm diving into it. And then boom, I hear this rah, rah. I'm like, what the hell is that noise? I'm in my office right here. I look, and there is a raven that landed right here cawing at me. like really loud. I'm like, what are you doing, Raven? And I'm literally diving into the darkness of Astroworld. So I have to go outside. And I'm by bear. I live in I'm out in the Six Rivers National Forest, basically surrounded by animals. But this was very odd. And it was like, it flew up onto our shed and was just like cawing at me like mad. Like, why are you looking at that stuff? Until I finally came in, I turned it off and then it flew away. So, I mean, that is some weird, trippy stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree. I think the animal kingdom, they're tapped into the ethers and know what's going on. And I think the more aware we are about that, they're universal conscious as a species, as Steiner would say, right? Like each animal family or kingdom has its own consciousness. They're here as a representation of the reality in a way that is unique and different and important for us to tap into as much as we can.
So then let's move from the animal kingdom and let's talk metaverse, because that's kind of like the opposite side of the coin in a way, like
very
in terms
much.
Of
Perfect.
So where do you want to begin?
On the Francis Bacon book, Metaverse. That's the plan.
Hold on. I had no idea Francis Bacon has a book called Metaverse. So please.
No, I meant so the connection between Francis Bacon fake book, because and that the fact that Facebook that's the whole thing, right? Right.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the inversion of the new Atlantis, right? It's this simulacrum, if you will, this digital reality of bringing people in to have whatever they want, their dreams, whatever you want in the metaverse, right? But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot.
Can I take a swing?
Yeah, please.
All right. So this I put out this video, and the nuts and the bolts of it are this. The announcement of fake book to Meta is a significant marker in the mainstream storyline of humanity's relationship with the technological world. Like, that's why it's important. It's not important like stock prices or anything like that. It's not important. It's like, this is a marker. And so what metaverse is if you could go back in time to like the mid 90s, when internet first came out, when that word first began to work its way through the collective consciousness, there was a period of time in which people had to understand what the internet was. Like, there was like, I don't quite understand. Do I like go to it? Is there a store? Is there an internet store? What side? Because it was outside. And this is a real interesting thing. This is when you know you're working with something artificial, because you've got no point of reference. It's not human. You're like, I don't get it. Like, what is it? So the word metaverse is the same thing. It's like, it's a mark by Facebook changing their name. It's a marker that the metaverse is, this is coming, in the same way in the early 90s marked the internet was coming. And all the metaverse is the next iteration of the technologies. For the most part, it's the next iteration of the technologies which we already are familiar with. The internet, the technologies for the internet had already been around in the early 90s. There was already like TCP, DARPANET technology. There was already like World Wide Web, HTTP, all of that was already in existence. But it really wasn't until like the mid 90s when anthropologists would say the age of the internet began.
Well, until you had the service providers start to make it so normies could get into it.
Exactly. Like, that's what AOL was. That's what all these things were. We're going to send, you're so friggin' stupid, humanity. I'm going to send it in the mail to you, and you're going to put it in your friggin' computer. Like, that's where we were.
Yeah.
And
you
so like, now
mail.
we look back and we laugh and all that sort of stuff. So the same thing's happening right now. So metaverse. So what is the metaverse? The metaverse is the next iteration of the technology. And it is imagine all of the technologies and all of the platforms that we have are seamlessly integrated. You're not going off one to the other. And and as opposed of watching the technology on a screen, like right now I'm on a laptop, I'm looking at a screen, I'm separate. You're moving into more and more of an immersive technology, and how we best understand it right now is the virtual reality goggles and stuff like that, where we are inside of it or seemingly inside of it. So that's kind of the metaverse, and
it's kind of virtual meets augmented meets social media meets the Internet of Things.
It's everything. It's
everything. Yeah.
It's when they were talking, if we think about what they were saying the internet was going to be in the early 90s, and then we look at what it was in the mid 2000s, we could see where it was close, and we could see like, oh, I didn't see that coming. So I'm assuming we can make those same assumptions right now. Like this is the picture which I have in my mind of the metaverse, which is seemingly available right now. So, you would come to, you'd want to visit me like in the metaverse, and I'm going to have a house in the metaverse. We're all going to have houses on the metaverse, and it's going to be whatever I want the house to be, like, oh, overlooking like, a canyon or the ocean or something. And you're going to walk in, and just like let's say Instagram, you've got public Instagram or private Instagram. If I got public Instagram, I let you into my house, and I've got a courtyard, and all of my Instagram images are there on the walls. And if you like it, you could go into it, and like it's all connected, seamless. Likewise, you're going to see other people who are in my courtyard as well. You might see my aunt. You'll be like, hey, Mike? I know Mike. Oh, how do you know? Like, it's got all of this sort of stuff. And like, there's going to be, you could go to the Facebook building and look people up in the directory. Like, it's going to be experiential from the goggles. Like, it's all going to be connected. And it's going to be kind of like cool. Like, I'm describing it like you can imagine really cool, fun things about that. Of course, like crack is cool. Like you get high and you're like on crack and you're feeling awesome. Like, that's in it. Like that is that. But here's the thing. When you look at the bigger picture, it is unbelievably, it is the simplest conclusion is that, the metaverse marks the end of the human experience. Maybe not immediately, but where the metaverse will end up. I was on a show a couple of weeks ago with a guy who said that over the Thanksgiving weekend, he was the host of Brad from the Propaganda Report. He was saying he put on the top of the line, but off the shelf VR goggles. So this is stuff which is commercially available. It's like top of the line stuff, like, it costs money, but it's not like, cutting edge, top secret sort of things.
Yeah.
And he said that he had an expectation that it was going to be spectacular, and he had an expectation that it was going to be kind of dangerous, but it blew his mind. He said it was so good. And I was like, well, what did you see? And he said, I put on the goggles and I was on a balcony overlooking a waterfall, and I was sitting down in this chair, and there was a tumbler with whiskey on the table next to me. And he was like, it was the most real, amazing experience I ever had. And I had to take it off as quickly as I could. Like you're not, it's too good. It's too good. It's too good. It is, if you could just think that one, that's where it is now. And two, apply that to any scenario that you want to experience. And then you add in Neuralink, because all of the, or you're going to add in like a hectic suit where you could feel the pressure on your chest, or like, the porn industry really drives the technology. So it's all of like, the genitalia stimulation. I don't know how quickly, but of course, we're going to end up like the Matrix, like in the Matrix, and the fact that the human body is in a tub and it has no idea it's in a tub, and it's having a complete reality, which is happening in their head. That's the conclusion. That is undoubtedly where we are going to go. That is, there used to be an old adage that the first time you smoke crack, you're hooked to life. I've never smoked crack. I talk about crack a lot, but that turned out to be a lie. Like that turned out to be one of those like war on drugs, like fears. My sense is the technology of the coming metaverse is going to be so amazing that is going to be a truth, that the moment you have that in your system, in your nervous system, that life will feel empty in comparison. And And I think that's going to be clear to people. I think people are going to be lining up to go to it. Some people are not. That may be a period of time. But all of that points to something else and points to, well, I can't do that. That's not what happens for those folks who don't want that path. And then that to me opens up a whole new doorway. And they've given us, we for most people, we have two stories. You either are going to go the dystopian or smart city future, or you get to become a Stone Age farmer. But I don't think those are the only options. I don't think that at all. This is where the Tartaria myth or the Tartaria history or the Tartaria story comes into play. And I think that it is through this obvious downfall. And what I would imagine what a metaverse would do is going to be so focused upon destruction and death that it's going to collapse upon itself. And in a way, Francis Bacon is the one that points it out. FB points that out because you can see it. And then, and what it does is it provides the barrier of where you don't want to go. Of where okay, I'm not going there. I know I don't want to go there. So what else could there be? And when we begin to go and apply creative thought, the workings of consciousness, magic, all of these things, the working on the ethers, that is when we begin to go and fully maybe discover the potentiality of what it means to be in a human body with sky overhead and earth under our feet. And as you said, Bear, and outside and move past the end of time, the age of time.
Yeah, it sounds way too suspiciously like Steiner's eighth sphere to me. And I choose not to go near it. And again, with all the cool things that are happening, all the organic technologies through radiesthesia and what Mike describes with some of the Reich technologies and things. Hey, we're playing with the real deal. We don't have to go into a little room somewhere.
I will say this. We were playing around with the VR stuff and it's fun. Like I was doing snowboarding on it, and actually I got a little queasy because I'm like, my kids were loving it. I'm like, I got to sit down a little bit. I was feeling a little off. It's fun. It's really cool. And I see, just like any tool technology, if you have the consciousness to rise above it and go in and enjoy it and use it for fun. Like I like video games. I play video games every now and then. I don't really have a lot of time right now, but I think that's really where we need to get to, right? It's like being virtuous and understanding consciousness, and then like being able to enjoy that. And then you're going to have the opium dens of back in Francis Bacon's day, where people couldn't, and they were in the opium dens. Those are going to be the metaverse dens, like the metaverse thing. And so, but I do think the metaverse could be like the Stone Age digital step towards pure consciousness of us being able to do a lot of what that's trying to do via digital, psychic, meeting in other realms, going to fantastical places, and opening up that consciousness so people can realize I don't need the neural link. I can do it naturally through organic analog means. And something I've talked on this show since day one is I think we're moving in the end towards a new analog revolution, using whether it's crystal tech or what, where we'll be literally looking into a magic ball like the magicians back in the day, and going into other realms and playing with this actual real technology. While maybe a bifurcation of society does happen for a while, where we do see people that are stuck in the asphere, as Steiner says. So yeah, it's a wild ride.
And
you know that.
Do we trust people like Zuckerberg or anybody making these virtual reality games into not, just sending little frequencies on carrier waves to really engram things into our consciousness in the first place? I just say, it might be kind of cool. Maybe I can control it, but I just don't think it's wise to mess with it.
I'm more extreme than you are, Mike, in terms of the scenario. The conclusion I reach, and again, this is just the conclusion I reach. I think that, as you described, that with intention and consciousness, you could go into the technology. I think that's a slippery slope. That's like, hey,
I agree.
I could smoke a couple cigarettes, but I got a lot of will control. So I'm never going to get hooked.
Well, I could see a major bifurcation of society. I do. And I could see the bifurcation being 85% people stuck going in that way, because we've seen look at Twitter, look at any social media. It's like hard. You're like, man, as society, we're like so dumbed down, and just our priorities are like, Kardashians and Monday Night Football and Cheetos and Budweiser. Right. So, yeah, I agree with that too, Michael. But as someone who works in technology and decentralization, also, if we can just see that, like, there are people that are trying to create.
True. I'll agree with that. But here's the thing. I like to look. One of the ways in which I try to navigate my waking reality is, a tree by the fruit which it was produced, but you also know the tree by looking at who planted the seed and stuff like that. And all of our technology, all of the beginning technology, is all a byproduct of the minds that were focused on how to economically kill as many people as possible.
I was just going to say DARPA.
It comes from the military industrial complex, and so you can look at that like from consciousness level, and the actual act of creating the hardware, of acquiring the raw materials and everything that comes along with that, whether that's moving people off of a particular part of land for the rights of those materials or the slave labor. It is from that, and this is what I mean by my conclusion. And so this is where it gets really sticky, because we're all vested, because you're absolutely right. Like that not everyone involved with technology is a DARPA like Deathtron. I used to work in the same I don't know like what part of technology you're in, but I used to work in the building which housed May East, which is the largest, or at least in the time in the 90s, was the largest exchange of all of the backbone carriers of the internet. There's May East and May West, the Metropolitan Access Exchange. Like, I worked in that world. I know those people. I sometimes think like one of the reasons I understand technology so much from a level is because of my time spent there. But that's why, to me, by looking at the technology itself and the model of pay to play, we have an entire like pay to play model of life. You got to pay your taxes, you got to pay this, you got to pay that. And recognizing that is still within that realm of reality. But I am 100% on the same page of you when you said like crystal technology. I think every single thing which is done on technology is going to be able to do another way, which does not come with the same sort of limitations. Like quartz crystals make so much sense to me, because quartz crystals are found on every corner of Earth. Many stones are only found here and there, but quartz crystals are everywhere. I don't think that there is like, you got to get that one thing, the one root, the one algae, the one crystal. No, I think that the human experience on Earth is not designed in that scarcity model. It's designed like oxygen. It's everywhere.
Yep. Yeah,
that's how I approach that. But we're going to see, right? We're going to see.
I think the biggest thing with technology is that is the top-down structure, which is the economics and the I don't call them elites. We call them whatever you want to call those individuals that have been around for thousands of years pulling the strings. Like, that needs to collapse. And we need to go back to a sacred reality, right? Where we understand the sacred, where we understand who we are and why we're here. And then that technology is a proper tool that we can play with and have fun with. But as long as we're in this crazy psychopathic driven run casino world, then it's frightening as hell. But as a child of two boys who are growing up in that generation, and I want them to be able to have experiences, I feel like if I can educate them enough to know you're going into just know the puppeteers behind us are creepy, but we can play in it. Let's see what it's all about. Let's not be in fear, right?
It's such an interesting time to have children, because it's not easy. It is not
Yeah.
easy one way, like no matter what. That I think that is the one thing we could say for certain. Here's a game I like to play with myself a lot. What happens if all the like whatever you want to call them, the psychopathic string pullers disappear tomorrow? Like literally it's gone. Like how does that play out? Like what, you know, what does that scenario look like? Like, do people still like, do I still go to when do people catch on when they see that there's no new programming on the news, when they see like, how does that work? Does someone say, I'm going to stop going to my job right now? Or like, how would that, and I don't know that.
The mystery school people, like the Francis Bacons, or they would say the profane, right? They call them, would be like rioting and killing each other. But I actually think people would probably go back to small communities.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And I would say the events of the past 652 days would even encourage that more so. Like this has really prepared us for that in a way.
Yeah. I don't think we need to wait for the psychopaths to disappear because, you know, a lot of things looming on the horizon right now are really going to be forcing people to tap into their resourcefulness and just start thinking for themselves, because the old things we've been relying on, I just don't count on them being around anymore, especially just trying to feed yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, hey guys,
how do we move forward, Bear?
Yeah. What's the plan, Bear? What do you got besides your bunker shelter and your arsenal?
You know, people are always asking me, where should I be? You know, where's the safe place? And I just say, it's wherever you're called to be. You know, you're supposed to be where you're supposed to be at. It might be in the middle of a city. It might be out in the boonies. I'm here not because I'm afraid of anything. I'm just here because I'm supposed to be here. So, you know, the way we go forward is every individual just tapping into that inner voice and, you know, finding out where they're supposed to be, what they're supposed to do. And we're all creating, you know, individually, and you can only free yourself. You can't free anybody else. And what we're experiencing here is a lot of people are circling the wagons, just remarkable people finding us and moving into the area, and they've got skill sets. And, you know, unlike the old communes of old, you know, folks are just not here because they're needy or, you know, just trying to get a free ride. They're all just coming with, you know, valuable insights and talents. And so what you just said, as far as small communities, it's happening. And in my life, it's happening because we're just doing, you know, we're just following our own path, and similar people find each other. So it's an organic process. It's already happening. I don't think we even have to figure anything out.
I would agree with that. The minimal planning. And I imagine there's going to be this kind of relationship between the homesteaders, the community folks, and then the people who go between the communities. And well, there'll be like a period of time, like, you know, maybe, and that to me is almost nostalgically refreshing. But what that would do in a way is it reestablishes a humanity which seemingly has been lost over the last 20 years. And a new relationship with the environment, like not necessarily in like a eco care sort of way, but understanding where you are in spatial reality and how to identify, you know, how to move.
I envision you as like a bard going between these communities, Michael.
I would love to do that.
Yeah.
I have I have like a passion to make bags. It's the weirdest thing. I'll show you one right now. So you see this right here. This began as, you can see, it says US Mint quarters. This is a real US Mint money bag, solid as can be. And then someone sent this to me, and then I just turned it into like usable drawstring bags. I've got lots of them, and I like to keep my things, and I have bags which bags go in. And the question which I pose to myself, because I begin the question or begin the inquiry process with the perspective that there aren't mistakes, that I haven't made a mistake, that I didn't make the wrong choice, like all this sort of stuff. I begin with the perspective is like, how is this the right choice? How did this prepare me for what to come? So all that being said is like the only way the bags make sense is in the environment which I just described and doing that sort of stuff. Like, oh yeah, well that's why I was doing it, you know. And so yeah, I'm on that. That's the way I look at it.
Well, in the end, it's all about having fun with whatever we're up to. I've always been a big fan of the Stoic philosophy. It's like deal with the cards you're dealt and realize nobody gets out of this alive. And you have fun with it. That's how we always kind of lead the conversation here. It's like, if you're spending all day prepping and worrying, then in the end, when it all goes down, sure, you're prepped, but you might be the only one around with all your cans of beans. So, enjoy the damn day, So shout out to Marcus Aurelius. I read a little bit of meditations, like almost every day. All right. Marcus Aurelius, because it always just grounds me back into that idea, right? It's like, enjoy the day. Enjoy the time is now. And that's kind of what our call tag for the event that when I opened up with this, the time is now, right now. So have fun with it.
I concur.
Yeah. Well, Michael, so fun talking with you today, man. One of those talks where I could go on for another few hours. We didn't even touch.
Like we're just getting warmed up.
Yeah. So you are. I hope you become a regular. We'd love to have you back on. There's so much fun stuff to talk about. I really want to go more next time into the Susquehanna mysteries more. Dive in, because one thing Bear and I like to talk about is U.S. history, where we come from, founding fathers, all that lovely, rich stuff, which I know you love covering. So love to go.
Right. I'm going to hit you with 1 2-minute story before we wrap this one up, because I think this is fun. Did you give me screen share capabilities by any chance?
I will right now.
All right. So part of it, in my opinion, this whole sort of being in a body with feet on the earth and sky above is like figuring out what the hell is going on and how it works. Like that's the fun for me. And that's like the Francis Bacon thing. It's like part of being the king is discovering the treasure, finding the treasure. So it began, I told this story in the beginning about how I started looking into the Susquehanna River, and because I came at it with a past of all of this like intrigue, that I found myself in the midst of the intrigue. And you asked me for a biography, and I really didn't send you one, but what I did send was Gonzo Researcher. And what I mean by that is I continually find myself involved in the story. It's not like I'm researching something separately. So I'm going to give you 2 more examples right now of, I mean, to the best of my knowledge, I'm the only cat who's been out there talking about the Susquehanna River. Like, and I started doing this a couple of years ago because 1, who's really talking about rivers? Then 2, like the Susquehanna, unless you live in like the middle of Scranton, Pennsylvania,
Scranton, baby,
New York, you've never heard of the Susquehanna River. So as I began talking about on shows, like obviously like the consciousness of it as an entity. And that's one of these questions which I have is like, what is a river ? So as I've been talking about it over the years, like more strange things have happened. So I'm going to show you 2 things that have shown up, and we could go and write it off. We're like, oh yeah, it's just, timing or what have you. Or we could go and say like, what is the nature of reality? We're talking about all these weird things and now they're popping off in material reality. So the first thing which I want to share came out. Where am I going to find this? This is a story. This came out. This is like a local blog. Can you see? Yeah, you can see that, right? Where it says Universal York.
We got it.
This is a local blog, and this was from February 7th, 2021, and it's called Mystery Rock in the Susquehanna. Why would a large rock at the edge of the Susquehanna River have numbers and letters carved in it? I'm not talking about the petroglyphs of birds and animals left by the Native Americans. William Halterman shared these photos of a boulder in the river in Lancaster County's East Donegal Township. The site is just a little upstream from the foot of Vinegar Ferry Road near Marietta, Pennsylvania. So what I want to point out right now is where this location is very, very accessible. Where these rocks are, like people are fishing and boating around it all the time. And then just out of nowhere, this shows up on it. Like, look at the carvings of these, like this looks like it was like stamped in there by some sort of like fourth dimensional printer. Like when I see this, like, I don't have an answer for this. I'm just like, what the hell is that? And it's been tied back to a very specific Freemasonic order called the Order of the Orange. But without like trying to go and demystify it with like, well, this is where it came from. This story just pops up. People have been coming here for like hundreds of years and no one's ever talked about this. So that seemingly is this reinforcement of this mystery of the Susquehanna. Now, the other thing which I talk about a lot is the significance of the Herkimer diamond, which is a very, very unique quartz crystal, which is found just a short while from the source location of the Susquehanna River, about 10 miles away in what's Herkimer, New York. That's why they're called Herkimer diamonds. What makes a Herkimer diamond so unique is the fact that it is double terminated, meaning that there are points on both ends naturally. 99.99% of all quartz crystals grow single terminated. And then it also has a water clarity. So those two things make it a very, very rare stone, which is only found elsewhere. And because its uniqueness and its proximity to the Susquehanna River, it's a major telling point within my telling of the Susquehanna mystery. So this just happened too. I just found out about this. And it is this rare find. This is from 2019. So the other story was 2021. They discovered in the Susquehanna River. This is in 2019. So like right when the whole event 201 was taking place, they found this very, very similar to Herkimer diamonds, but different in the Susquehanna River. Like the same sort of mysterious stone just pops up. And so to me, and this is how I kind of want to end it, not necessarily to say that this is an indication of the mystery of life and how when we place our focus, like you get more and more of what you're placing your focus on. But I also want to say maybe that's exactly how it works, because this seems to be demonstrating that fact really, really well. This was a lot of fun. Bear, Mike, I am grateful for you guys having me on here. And I hope that this is not the only time. In fact, I hope that I'm able to come out to California and see your spectacular places face to face.
Michael, just a blessing having you here today, and one of the more fun podcasts we've ever done, I think, and definitely need to have you back because there's so much more that I wanted to talk about and pick your brain about. So let's do this. We'll keep in touch, and you always have a place out here, and a lot of good wilderness to explore. I think you'll really like it out here. So you've always got a home.
Yeah, we also live on a river. So we live on the Smith River, funny enough. I
heard you mention it, and I already was reaching it in the beginning of the show.
Jedediah Smith. So the famous
it should
Jedediah.
be called the Hayuchi River, but somebody who came more recently decided to name it after himself. I take a little exception with that myself.
We have a wonderful place for you to stay, either on my neck of the woods or out at the farm, and you're always welcome. And I might have to look you up when I'm back east visiting family in upstate, because I used to go every summer. We have a little cottage on a little lake in Pennsylvania on the other side of the border from Binghamton, and I love that area. It's just so much dense forest and so much mystery over there. And there are a handful of old growth forests, plots of old growth forest in Pennsylvania. And so you definitely, when you come back, you want to go there before what the forests look like before the timbering of the 1700s, because it's spectacular. And the place where you indicated your pond or the lake is, if it's near Binghamton and if it's on the Pennsylvania side, it's very, very close
close to the beginning of the Mormon story, where they claim that Joseph Smith was baptized in the water, and that's a very, very magical and significant region. So if you can make it back, I would love to give you a personal tour, and we could go and discover some of these mysteries ourselves.
Oh,
so Michael, if I could share just like a very quick story.
Please.
Right in the neck of the woods that you're describing, there is a story of George Washington in his younger years. He was on horseback and lost, and then he found a cabin in those nearby woods. And, the lights and the fire were on. He went in and he discovered this old man and his daughter that were there. And it's an amazing story. But by meeting with this special gentleman, this old man, he basically gave George Washington, who is purported also to be a Mason, right? His vision as far as what role he would be playing in his future life and everything that transpired after. So, and then this old guy kind of mysteriously disappeared after that event. And I think there's a lot going on in those backwoods.
We should pick whenever the next time I come back on, we pick up right there, because I can run with that, because I've got some real good stories which will fit in.
Oh, good.
That sounds like fun.
And have you ever been to Watkins Glen, by the way, Michael?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That place, I go there. I like to go there whenever I can. That's a magical place. You don't even realize you're in upstate New York. You feel like you're in Thailand or something.
So okay. So we got to have a conversation about this. So Watkins Glen is on the foot or on the bottom of Lake, I believe it's Lake Seneca of the Finger Lakes. Mm-hmm. And when you begin to understand what was going on there, everything from like a Iroquois Nation sort of perspective, but then even more so, I like to get into, I don't know if you know Peter Shampoo and like Gaia Matrix and what he's mapped out and the significance of that area. And then you look at Cornell there and all that sort of stuff. Like that is such a key epicenter.
Very cool.
So let's talk about that stuff the next time.
Okay, Michael,
Sweet.
Thanks so much. Hey, everybody, thanks for joining us on the chat. Really wonderful chat going on in both DLive and YouTube. We even had some on Odyssey. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week with Renette Seenum. I believe she's our guest. She's running for governor on an independent ticket against the gruesome Newsom. So that'll be a really fun one. And then we have Joel Salatin for a Christmas special, who is another wonderful storyteller, America's most famous farmer. So, hey guys, thanks again. Like we always end the show, get outside, get your feet in the dirt, go plant something, go for a hike. Mother Nature is our greatest teacher. We love you, and we'll see you next week. And we'll see you at the event, alphavedic.com/the event. Thanks, Michael. Oh, Michael, by the way, where can people find you? What's the best website to go to? Sorry, and I'll put that in the show links below.
SusquehannaAlchemy.com and Susquehanna Alchemy YouTube channel. From the website, you could send, I've really brought that down. I've become very conscious with what I'm going to be putting on the internet going forward. But if you want any sort of correspondence and or personal sessions, hit me an email through that. Is probably the best way to do it.
Wonderful. And I will put that in the show notes below. So, hey guys, thanks so much. Have a beautiful day. We'll see you next time. Love you. Cheers.